The second door. No one knew what the letter said. No one saw the tears. They only knew it arrived on a morning as quiet as a snuffed candle, and from that moment on, everything changed. On the morning of June 12, exactly 19 days after his election, Pope Adrian XIV stood alone at the window, looking down at St. Peter's Square. Below, banners had begun to flare in the breeze. Families, priests, elderly couples, and bright-eyed children waited for the general audience. Up above, in a private room washed with early light, the clock had barely stopped when the Secretary of State, Cardinal Álvaro Méndez, stepped in with a cream-colored envelope. No special seal, only a faded postmark. "Bari, Your Holiness," he said, voice lower than usual. Adrian XIV, secular name Samuel Luca Rinaldi, nearly 70, born on the outskirts of Detroit, took the envelope. The instant his fingers touched the paper, he knew 61 years had passed. Yet that name still sat in his memory like a thorn. Luca Rinaldi, the father who had left one October morning, no farewell, no note, only the. He opened the letter with trembling fingers. 3 pages, ink slightly smudged, the handwriting old and uneven. "My son, Samuel, if you still wish to call me father, let me say this first. I saw the news of your election on TV and I wept. Not with pride, with shame." Samuel shut his eyes. In his mind, the wooden door of the old house slammed again. 7 years old, his mother stood in the kitchen, biting her lip until it bled. His grandfather's hand on a small shoulder. No explanation, only absence. And from then on, questions no one answered. "Your mother, Maria, and your grandmother raised you well. I ran because I feared becoming the worst version of my own father. I thought leaving would harm you less. In running, I did the worst thing of all." He read about a small carpentry shop on the outskirts of Bari where that man had lived alone, making pews and tables for parish churches. No new wife, no new family, just a pile of clipped newspapers and secret photographs tracking a son's life from priest to bishop to cardinal, and now to pope. "I don't ask for your forgiveness. Some wounds don't heal. I only want you to know, not a day has passed that I haven't thought of you. If the great heart of the shepherd still has room for an old man full of remorse, I ask to see you once. If not, I understand. I will respect your silence." Samuel folded the letter and pressed it to his chest. He was no longer the pope. He was a son. He did not wipe his tears. A little later, Cardinal Méndez returned. Samuel still sat motionless, the letter in his hands. "Álvaro," he said, rarely using the first name, "how do we answer someone who made us suffer and now sincerely asks to be forgiven?" "As the Lord teaches," the cardinal replied, "steady, with mercy, and with love." Samuel nodded and dabbed his eyes with a linen cloth. "Arrange a drive to Bari," he said, quietly. "No press, no motorcade, just a son going to see his father. Your schedule. There are hours of God that matter more than our calendars." Samuel cut in, gentle but final. "He has waited 61 years. He will not wait one more day." A black car left the Vatican that afternoon. Inside, there was no white zucchetto. Samuel wore a black suit and Roman collar, his fingers moving along a rosary. Beside him, Cardinal Méndez watched the Italian countryside fall away, silent like a pilgrim. "I've told others to forgive thousands of times," Samuel said, eyes on the bands of sunlight across olive groves. "Today the Lord asks me to do what I've always said." No answer was needed. Some words don't require replies. Samuel touched his breast pocket. The letter was there. He'd read it until he knew the lines by heart. "I feared becoming my own father. Not a day has passed. If there is room in the shepherd's heart." They reached a narrow street. A 3-story house. Iron balconies overflowing with geraniums. The number was a ghost of old paint. On the wooden door, a plaque. "Rinaldi." Samuel drew a breath. Time to knock. The bolt slid. Hinges sighed. An old man stood in the doorway. Back bowed. Hair white. But the eyes were unmistakable. Stone gray. The very eyes Samuel had met in the mirror his whole life. "Samuel." The word scraped free. "Papa," he answered with a single word. And the 61-year gap shifted. The small flat smelled of old wood and coffee. Crosses hung on the walls, handcrafted by the owner. A low cabinet opened to a hoard of clippings and black and white photos, the ordination program gone yellow. The red of a cardinal's robes. And the most recent image? A white figure on a balcony over a sea of faces. I thought you'd forgotten me, Samuel said, hands shaking as he turned the scraps. Not a day, the old man whispered. I just couldn't face myself. Why did you leave? The question of a 7-year-old finally came out in the voice of a 70-year-old. I lost my job. I drank. I looked at you, bright as a June sky, and I was a workshop with no lights. I told myself, he'll be better without me. I was foolish enough to think leaving was a kind of love. That's not love, that's fear. Yes, he swallowed. Fear that turned into cowardice. Silence. Not the crushing kind. The kind a church holds at noon, empty yet resonant. I prayed for you every night, Samuel said, even when I thought you were dead. The father covered his face. He wept, not loudly. Just a trembling of shoulders and a snagged breath. I don't deserve to sit here. Samuel drew the letter from his pocket and read the final line. If the great heart of the shepherd still has room for an old man full of remorse. This wound isn't healed, Samuel said, but it can still feel. That means it can still be mended. You forgive me? I'm beginning, he answered honestly. Forgiveness isn't a door you throw open once. It's a road. If you will walk it with me, I will walk it. The old man nodded. They embraced, no ceremony. No music, only a single sob. The seed of something holy was planted. Not investments, but in an ordinary pair of arms. At breakfast the next day, they sat over steaming cups. A quiet that needed no filling. Come to Rome with me, Samuel said. To Rome? He looked down at his worn jacket. I don't belong there. I'm not inviting a guest. I'm inviting my father. That's belonging enough. That afternoon a modest cart took them past vineyards and bell towers. No curious stares, no escort. Just two men. One relearning how to say, Father. The other learning how not to run. Through the Vatican's side gate, ancient olive trees welcomed them with shade. Samuel led his father along a gravel path to a stone bench beneath a fig tree. I sit here every morning. When the noise is too much. I remember who I am. And who are you? The old man asked. Still the boy who waited for the door to open. Samuel said, but now he knows he has a father who never leaves. He took a small wooden rosary from his pocket. Worn smooth by years. I've had it since seminary. It went with me from Detroit to here. Today, it should go with you. The old man's hands shook. I have nothing to give back. I'm not asking for anything. I'm asking you to stay. A week later, St. Peter's Square was a field of wheat, dense and swaying. Samuel stepped onto the balcony in white. Raised his hand. He greeted in several tongues. Then paused. Today, he said, I speak not only as a shepherd. I speak as a son. The murmur stilled. 61 years ago, my father left. No words. I carried that emptiness through my vocation. Across altars. Into rooms. Last week, I received his letter. No excuses, only truth. I went to Bari. We looked at each other and spoke the sentences that had waited a lifetime. I began to forgive. It was not easy, but mercy is greater than time. He turned his gaze toward the tribune, where an old, white-haired man sat beside Cardinal Mendes, gripping a rosary. He is here. For a heartbeat the square went silent, as if someone had cut the sound. Samuel opened his arms. The father rose, steps unsteady. They embraced. No anthem, no stagecraft, only mercy made visible. A young woman in the front row cried. A middle-aged man covered his face. Flags lowered. No one knew what father and son said. No one needed to. Everyone understood. That evening, in a small room, the father whispered, Today I wasn't brave. I was forgiven. And that gave me courage. That's enough, Samuel replied. 2 days later, letters fell like a first summer rain. Not from heads of state, from ordinary people. A grandmother in Córdoba. A mechanic in Krakow. A girl in Busan. An inmate in Medellin. Shaky lines. I called my son after 3 years of silence. I wrote to my mother. If the Pope can embrace his father, maybe I can ring the bell. Cardinal Mendes laid a new stack before Samuel. Your Holiness, something is happening. Don't turn it into a campaign. Samuel said, turn it into presence. What do we call it? Looking out across an empty square where pigeons pecked at crumbs in the sun. Samuel said, the door mission. No documents, no slogans, just open doors and sit down. A small bulletin began, publishing one anonymous letter each week. No commentary, no homily, Only ordinary words that could take root in ordinary hearts. Parishes in Recife held evenings of prayer for family reconciliation. A friar in Kigali set up a counseling corner after the evening mass. In a prison in Calabria, inmates watched the embrace on a flickering screen and then wrote to those they had left behind. The father, Luca, started receiving letters of his own, forwarded quietly through the secretary's office. Each evening he sat in a small chapel under the olives, praying the rosary and reading names aloud. His replies were short. Keep going. You are not alone. Knock. In autumn, the Vatican gardens opened for something never done before, the Day of the Door. No name tags, no velvet ropes. Beneath olive boughs stood wooden confessionals nearby. Tables with paper and envelopes for the unsayable. A line of candles led to a small crucifix by the fountain. Luca arrived through the side gate, clutching the rosary his son had given him. He was invited to a low wooden platform. He unfolded the speech he had prepared, then set it down. I have a prepared text, he said, voice stronger than he looked. But I won't read it. My name is Luca. I am a father. I ran from my son when he was 7. Not because I stopped loving him, because I was afraid. I told myself silence would hurt less. I was wrong. 61 years later, I knocked. My son opened. He scanned faces without seeking one in particular. If there's someone you need to call, call. If there's a letter you must write, write it. If "I'm sorry" is stuck in your throat, say it. Say it late. Say it trembling. Say it anyway. The applause rose slow and deep, like an exhale, not exuberant, reverent. Toward evening, Samuel came, no red shoes, only worn leather sandals and a simple white cassock. He didn't climb the platform. He sat on a wooden chair among the people. We like to build doctrine into towers, he said with a tired smile. But some things don't need towers. They need a hand on a handle and someone willing to turn it. Forgiveness is not a thesis. It's the handle of a door. He blessed them. No fireworks. Only the descent of evening upon bowed heads for something they had thought was lost. Winter settled over Castel Gandolfo. Luca's strength ebbed. He sat by the window, watching mist gather over the olives. Samuel came each weekend. They circled the chapel, walking slowly, relearning how to breathe. On the night of March 5th, Samuel held his father's hand and prayed the rosary, saying little. At dawn, Luca went to the Lord, light as a leaf. The funeral was small, in the chapel behind the garden. No announcement, no pomp, only those who had walked this road with them, the parish group of wounded fathers. An old pastor, a few quiet staffers, and Cardinal Mendes standing at the back, arms around a breviary. Samuel preached briefly. My father taught me something, not by words but by the path of his life. When love roots itself in mercy, it does not die, it transforms, it resurrects. They buried Luca beneath an olive tree. A simple stone with 5 words. Luca Rinaldi, Father. Forgiven. Free. Each spring, white narcissus appeared by the grave. No one admitted planting them. Still, they bloomed. The gardeners joked and named them, the flowers that come back. The door mission did not end there. It spread, not as a campaign, but as a habit of sitting down. A letter sent. A doorbell pressed without knowing who might answer. A slim book appeared. The second door, stitched with short meditations and a few anonymous stories. No ornament, no instructions, only true stretches of road. A teacher in Cebu wrote, my mother left when I was 9. I hated her for 20 years. Reading Mr. Luca's story, I realized my silence was a wall. 2. Last night, I wrote to her, a man in Galway. I stood at my daughter's door for 10 minutes with your book in my hand. I couldn't ring. I left it on the step with a note. Page 37 is me. She called that night. Samuel kept some letters in a cedar box beside his mother's rosary and a photo from his ordination. Sometimes, late at night, he lit a candle in his private chapel, reading nothing, saying nothing, only breathing. The flame trembled like a small secret. It is still in time. A year after the first day of the door, the garden opened again. No advertisements, no grand title. People came anyway. Children chased pigeons. Mothers held the hands of daughters. Men stood with their hands in their pockets, faces tight as though on trial, and then cried because no one judged them. From a distance, Cardinal Mendes jotted a line. There were no tongues of fire. But I saw hearts warmed. That is miracle enough. Samuel rose to speak, looking a long time at the crowd. I learned something from my father. God likes to use imperfect people to open doors that seem jammed forever. If you are standing before one of those doors, don't wait for music. Put your hand on the handle and turn. He glanced toward the far olives where a small stone lay among the grass. The late light leaned across the steps like a blade of candle. He smiled, very slightly. The next morning, Samuel returned to Castel Gandolfo. The narcissus were blooming again. He laid a rose on the stone and said softly, as if to himself, we're still walking, one step at a time. Beyond the veil, a father who had once run stood at rest, no longer ashamed, smiling, not because everything was perfect, because the door had opened, because a son had dared to turn the handle first. If you're thinking it's too late to forgive or too far to return, listen all the way through. There is no two that can stand before mercy. There is only a final, straight question. Like a latch on a door. Will you lift your hand? The Second Door, Part 2. The year after the narcissus bloomed again. The letters shifted. There were still the trembling reconciliations, the late phone calls, the 3-word apologies, but another current rose beneath them, more bracing, more honest. Some said, I tried. She said no. Others, my father is dangerous. How do I forgive without going back into harm? A few, I wrote. He died before the letter arrived. What now? Samuel read them at night by a single lamp. He kept a pencil in the book's gutter and underlined the same truth each time. Mercy is not control. He wrote a note for himself. Not for publication. We must teach people how to forgive without becoming foolish. How to open a door without removing the lock from a wolf's cage. He brought the note to Cardinal Mendez the next morning. Alvaro, we need to add bones to this grace. Guidelines? The cardinal asked. Not policies, practices. Samuel ticked them off on his fingers. Name the harm truthfully. Protect the vulnerable first. Seek restoration where safe. Accept refusal without coercion. And, this is hardest, practice posthumous reconciliation. Mendez lifted an eyebrow. Reconciliation with the dead? Some doors open after the hands are gone from both sides. Samuel said, we must show people how to knock anyway. They began calling them hinge circles. Not seminars, circles. The first met in a parish hall near the Tiber. A widow who could not forgive herself for words hurled in anger. A son who had driven 3 hours only to be turned away at his father's gate. A young mother whose own mother kept her grandchildren at arm's length. They sat around a candle and memorized 4 lines. Mercy tells the truth. Mercy guards the weak. Mercy asks. It does not force. Mercy keeps writing after the funeral. The circle spread quietly. Naples, Nairobi, Nagasaki. The door mission was no longer just a story, it was a way to sit and stay. And then a letter arrived for Samuel with a return address that made him stand. Via Venezia. Bari. The neighbor who wrote was named Giulia Serra. She had kept the keys to Luca's workshop during his last months. Watering his geraniums and sweeping sawdust that seemed to rise from the floorboards by itself. Your Holiness, she wrote in a simple, round hand. While tidying, I found an unfinished door leaning against the back wall. The hinges were chiseled but not set. There was also a small envelope taped to the frame. It says, for the boy I left, and below that, in a different ink, for the man I met. There is no address. I did not open it. It belongs to you. Samuel's fingers trembled on the paper. He did not answer immediately. He asked only for a car. The workshop on Via Venezia smelled as though the years had soaked into the beams and then learned to breathe. Dust swam in the sun. The unfinished door stood at a slant. A pale rectangle scarred by Luca's tools. 2 hinge beds cut. Rough but true. The third outline was penciled and waiting. Giulia, a brisk woman with wise eyes, handed Samuel a small envelope browned at the edges. He did not open it there. He closed his hand around it and rested his forehead against the wood of the door like a man who had reached a shrine without knowing its name. Would you like the door moved to Rome? Giulia asked. The door needs a place people can touch. Samuel said, not a museum, a garden. They did not varnish it. They did not perfect it. They lifted it as it was and took it home. In the Vatican gardens, beneath the fig where father and son had first sat, they mounted the door on 2 granite posts facing no wall. On the lintel they carved no Latin. No crest. Only a single word in small letters: return. Samuel opened the envelope that evening in the chapel. The letter was short, only 1 page, written twice, once in a furious, young hand, once copied beneath in the old, lined script Samuel knew. To the boy I left. I am learning that fear is not fate. It is a weather. It passes if a man waits and prays long enough. I am sorry that I made my weather your climate. If I could lift the years off your shoulders, I would. I cannot. To the man I met. I was wrong about time. It is not a thief. It is a field. We farm what we dare to plant. Thank you for letting me plant anything at all. Luca. Samuel folded the page and slid it into the cedar box. The next morning, children discovered the doorway in the garden. They ran back and forth through it, laughing, shouting. I went. I came back. Their mothers smiled and wiped their eyes. A seminarian knelt and touched the third penciled hinge. Leave it, Samuel told the gardener, who had moved to erase the marks. Some work we must always be about. The pushback came with winter. A columnist sneered that the door mission was therapeutic sentimentalism. A politician tried to wrap a campaign in its language. An old theologian warned that mercy without penance is cheap. Samuel asked for a copy of the column and underlined the parts that were right. He preached the following Wednesday without heat or defensiveness. Mercy is not cheap, he said. It is paid for, not by us, by God. But because it is paid for, it is not fragile. It can carry truth. It can insist on justice. It can say no to harm. And still keep a chair at the table if the day ever comes when it is safe to sit. He paused and added, if you want a movement with no risk, no wounds, no disappointment, this is not your movement. This is a field in weather. We sow. Some seeds drown, some burn, and some take. We keep sowing. That sermon did not go viral. It stayed where it needed to, in the ears of people who showed up anyway. He met with Marco in a side room of a parish house near Florence. Marco was 40, compact, with the dense stillness of someone who had clenched for years. He held a letter from his father, a man who had terrorized a home and now wanted to be seen before dying. I'm not going, Marco said. I don't owe him my face. Samuel did not argue. He poured tea. You don't owe him your safety. Samuel said, you don't owe him your body in a room where your body once learned fear. But you might owe yourself a sentence. A sentence? A sentence no one can interrupt. In a place you choose. Write it, or record it, or say it to the sea. You did this. It was wrong. I survived. I am not giving you myself. I am giving the truth a voice. Marco stared at the steam rising from the cup. And if he dies before he hears it? Then you will have said it anyway. To live without saying what must be said is another kind of harm. Marco nodded once. He did not come to the garden. He did not write back for months. Then a note arrived for the hinge circle. I went to the pier at Livorno and read my sentence to the wind. He died the next day. I slept for 10 hours for the first time I can remember. Samuel kept that one folded in his pocket for a week and touched it like a prayer. He made his own letter too. There was a priest named Francesco Neri whom Samuel had removed from a seminary position years earlier. There had been a complaint, never proved or disproved, and Samuel, as a bishop then, had acted with speed that was nearing rashness. Francesco was obedient and left the post. He took a hospital chaplaincy in a town no one visited on purpose. Samuel had thought of him at odd hours, like a lamp left on in another room. He found Francesco in the corridor of a cancer ward reading psalms to an old man who had fallen asleep with his mouth open. When they sat in the hospital chapel, Samuel did not dress like a pope. He wore a black suit. He held his hat in his lap. I decided, he began, without giving you a fair hearing. I am sorry. I cannot give back the years. But I can give back the truth. I was afraid of scandal. I called it prudence. Perhaps sometimes it was. Sometimes it was fear. I ask your forgiveness. Francesco looked at the floor for a long time. When he finally spoke, his voice held no heroics. It cost me. It made something hard in me softer. That cost was not cheap. I forgive you. They prayed a decade of the rosary in silence. When Samuel rose to go, Francesco caught his sleeve. Holy Father, he said, with a half smile, will you bless the man in room 12? He refuses confession, but he will accept a blessing if you tell him you are a hospital volunteer. Samuel laughed, the first genuine laugh that day, and nodded. For 20 minutes he was exactly that. Spring returned Narcissus to the olive roots. The garden was full, not noisy. A group of men from the Wounded Fathers Circle in Bari made a pilgrimage together. One of them carried a small wooden box. Inside were letters he had written monthly to a daughter who never answered. He placed the box at the base of the door and said, "To no one in particular. If she ever wants to read, they'll be here." A week later a woman arrived and stood before the door, her hands in the pockets of a blue coat. She looked like a person who was trying to appear to be just visiting. She did not cry. She did not pray aloud. She opened the box, read 2 letters, and closed it gently. On the way out, she told the gardener, "Tell him page 4 is the one I needed." The gardener didn't know who him was. It didn't matter. The message would find its way. The holy door of St. Peter's Basilica is opened only in Jubilee years. Sealed in mortar between. Samuel had no right and no intention to alter that ancient rite. But he did ask the master of works for a small exception, to attach a plain iron knob to the inside of the door. Not the outside, a knob that turned easily beneath the palm. "Why inside?" the craftsman asked. "Because God is not locked in," Samuel said, smiling. "We are. On the day of the rite. After the hymns and the hammer on the old sealed stones. After the chants rolled like a river through the nave." Samuel stepped behind the door for a moment alone. He reached for the plain iron and turned it, an old man. In a simple action that made no sound. He could hear children in the square beyond and the hush of thousands who had come to walk through. He thought of a carpenter in Bari who had cut 2 hinges and penciled a third. Of a neighbor who watered flowers and wrote letters. Of a son who had waited at a door and a father who never left. "You are good," he said to the quiet, which was not empty. "And you are patient." He pressed his forehead to the wood and then he began. That evening, back in his room, he took out the cedar box. He added another page. A note in his own hand. "If this work ever seems slow, look for 3 signs." A sentence spoken without shaking. A chair kept empty at a table. And a box of letters waiting in a quiet place. These are hinges. Doors follow hinges. He slipped the page beneath Luca's letter and closed the lid. The next week, the garden saw something new. A group of teenage boys clattered in, laughing too loudly, pretending not to care. One of them, tall, arms longer than his sleeves, stopped at the 3rd hinge and ran a finger along the pencil marks. "Who forgot to finish it?" he snickered, though not unkindly. An elderly sister pruning roses answered without looking up. "No one," she said. "It's a reminder." "Of what?" "That we always have 1 hinge left." The boys fell quiet in that way the young do when truth lands before they can dodge it. The tall one shrugged, then walked through the door and, without theatrics, walked back. "I went," he said softly. "I came back." "Good," the sister said, still pruning. "Come again." Letters still arrive by the thousands. Some are addressed to the Pope, some to the door, some to Luca. The rhythms repeat and yet never grow dull. Truth, safety, consent, persistence, mercy made ordinary. Once in a while, an envelope comes with no return address and no words inside. Only a single small key. The secretary keeps them in a drawer. No one knows to what they belong. Maybe to doors no longer standing. Maybe to doors not yet built. Samuel asked to hold one once. It lay light on his palm like a promise. "What shall I do with it?" the secretary asked. "Nothing," Samuel said. "Keep it." Keys don't always mean entry. Sometimes they mean hope. On the 2nd anniversary of the day of the door, rain threatened and then changed its mind. Clouds thinned. Light spread like a scarf being pulled across stone. People gathered, more numerous than before but less curious. They came the way one comes to a well they've learned is truly there. Samuel spoke last, as was his custom now. 2 years ago, he said, we told a story and thought it might end. It did not end. It sprouted. He pointed, not to himself nor to the altar, but to the faint path worn into the grass between the benches and the door, bare earth where thousands of feet had passed. "Look," he said, "the path is the point." He lifted his hand in blessing the way a father might lift a hand over a room that finally feels like home. Then he did what he now loved most to do. He slipped off to the side, found a chair near the roses, and watched people go and come back. Go and come back. He did not grow tired of it. He did not plan to. And when he finally rose to leave, He paused beside the fig and touched the penciled hinge. He was not in a hurry to finish it. He had learned that some lines were meant to stay as lines, so that we remember what our hands are for. He turned once more and saw, near the fountain, a woman in a blue coat speaking to a stocky man with his hands in his pockets. She said something. He nodded. They began to walk, slowly, toward the door. Samuel smiled. He had work to do in the morning. Tonight, he let the garden do its work. Somewhere beyond walls neither brick nor law could mark. He hoped Luca was still smiling too. And if there is a third door, and there always is, it waits already on its hinges, asking a single question with every quiet swing. Will you come again? The second door, part 3. By the third spring, the garden had a rhythm. People came early, walked through the freestanding door, sat, wrote, stood, went, returned. No big speeches, no drones, just feet wearing a light path into the grass. Then the storm hit. It came in hard from the west one night, wind that bent the olives and pelted the fig with needles of rain. By morning the door lay flat. One granite post tilted, the top rail cracked clean through. The staff stood around it. Miserable. Replace it? The foreman asked. No, Samuel said. Stand it up. Don't hide the break. They lifted the door, pinned the split with 2 wide brass plates, left bright against the pale wood. The third hinge outline stayed in pencil. On the lintel, below return, they screwed in a small brass strip with 4 blunt words. It fell. We stood it. That afternoon a boy in a red jacket ran his fingers over the new plates. It looks stronger, he told his mother, and bolted through. The next letters were not polite. One woman wrote, "My ex is waving your mercy stuff to push into our lives. He's not safe. Stop telling us to open doors." A man wrote, "The father who hid us wants lunch. He says God and the Pope say now I have to meet him. Do I?" Samuel didn't draft a homily. He called the hinge circle leaders and shut the door. "We need a simple spine," he said. "No poetry. 5 rules you can tape to a fridge." They argued for hours. They cut words. They cut more words. What remained fit on half a page? The hinge rules. Tell the whole truth. Name the harm out loud. Not softer. Not louder. Protect first. Safety of the vulnerable controls the timing and the terms. Ask, never force. Forgiveness is a gift. Reconciliation is optional. Require repair. Where possible. Amends. Accountability. Restitution. Words alone don't unlock doors. Honor distance. When contact is unsafe or refused. Practice forgiveness at a distance. Letters unsent. Prayers said. Sentences spoken where no one can interrupt. He preached once. Briefly. The church is not a corridor back into harm. He said, if someone uses our words to pressure you, tell them the Pope said this, no, and show them the 5 rules. The sermon didn't trend. It laminated well. People taped it to fridges. Julia Serra died in Bari that winter. She left the little workshop on Via Venezia to the parish with a 1-line clause in her will. Teach boys and men to make hinges and to write letters at the same table. They called it Hinge School. Saturday mornings, apprentices learned to cut mortises and to shape sentences. The rule was strict. For every hinge they cut, they wrote 1 honest paragraph to someone they owed truth. Some mailed them, some didn't. No one was pushed. On the first day a teenager named Davide held up his letter. Scowling, "What if she throws it away?" he said. "Then you wrote it," the old carpenter answered, not looking up from his chisel. "You're not a bin." They sent an unfinished door to the garden in Rome once a month. People touched them like relics because they were not. The drawer of keys kept filling. One day an old man knocked on the secretary's door, holding a photograph of a tiny brass key. "I think you have mine," he said. They let him try. He didn't try the holy door. He tried a little wooden box someone had left months earlier under the bench, a child's music box with a frozen ballerina. The key fit. He wound gently. The ballerina turned. Once, twice. The old man closed his eyes and cried without sound. "Her box," he said. "I've been carrying the song in my pocket." The secretary added a 6th, unwritten rule to her own list. Keep a drawer for small hopes. Not everyone played fair. A bishop on another continent, eager to repair his image after quiet cruelty to his priests, wrapped himself in the language of mercy and began touring parishes with a warm smile and no accounting. A journalist sent evidence. Samuel asked for the file. Read it, and called a tribunal. Mercy is not a blindfold. He told the man, face to face. Justice is part of the doorframe. He removed him. He said so out loud. The bishop wrote a furious letter and then a softer one. The tribunal kept working. The garden stayed open. When critics accused him of ruining a good story, Samuel shrugged. Good stories don't fear the whole plot. He said to Mendes, they fear lies. Marco wrote again. I went to Livorno and read my sentence to the sea. I slept. Last week my father's sister called. He left a small box with my name. In it was a photo of my mother. Young and laughing. I had forgotten her face like that. Thank you for the sentence. Samuel underlined one line. I slept. He kept the note in his pocket for another week. Francesco, the hospital chaplain, grew sick in spring. Samuel visited. The roles flipped. The priest asked the older man to hear his confession. Afterward they sat in silence. The kind that doesn't need repair. Do you ever wish the door had never fallen? Francesco asked, nodding toward the garden he knew of only from photographs. No, Samuel said. Breaks teach better than pamphlets. And brass is good. Francesco smiled. Brass is good, he said, and closed his eyes to rest. A migration of families began to come. From camps at the city's edge. A mother in a blue hijab and her son, 11. Wary. Fast, came 3 times in 1 week. The boy didn't walk through the door. He circled it. On the 4th day he shoved a folded paper into the brass plate and ran. The gardener fetched it and brought it to Samuel without unfolding it. What does he want? The gardener asked. Samuel opened the paper. It was written in block letters. Careful and wrong in places. Baba, if you come back I will not live in the stairwell. I will stay at the table. I will not shout. You can shout once. Then stop. Samuel folded it and slid it into the cedar box. Then changed his mind and took it back out. Put it in the hinge school. He told the gardener. On the wall. Let the boys learn from a boy. 2 weeks later the same child came. Walked straight through the door without stopping. And then back. He didn't look around to see if anyone had seen him. He didn't need to. The day came when a politician offered a grant with a speech attached. We will scale your dormition, he said, beaming. Metrics. Dashboards. Success at last. Samuel declined. We don't count like that, he said. Our measures are stubborn and small. What do you measure? The man asked. Irritated. 3 things, Samuel said. Sentences spoken without shaking. Chairs kept empty for a time that hurts. Boxes of letters kept in quiet places. When those go up, we're fine. The politician blinked. That's not data. It is, Samuel said. You're just not used to it. Mendes snorted later in the hall. You do enjoy losing friends. I prefer keeping work, Samuel said. They added one more practice. Simple and blunt. Walk and return. On the day of the door each year. No speeches were scheduled until everyone had walked through the door once and walked back. Then they went to one of 3 stations, a confessional, a table with paper, or a bench with a mediator. Only then did anyone speak at a microphone. You're making people earn it. Someone grumbled. No, Samuel said. I'm making them do it. It worked. The microphones grew less interesting. The benches grew more crowded. The path in the grass widened by 2 feet. Age pressed in. He didn't dramatize it. Knees went first. Then sleep. He asked the master of ceremonies to shorten the Wednesday route by 20 steps and to stop hiding chairs behind pillars. In the evenings he wrote short notes on index cards and slid them into the cedar box. If you can't walk, let the door come to you. Move it in your mind. That counts. When you don't know what to pray, say the name of the one you won't forgive. Sit with it. Don't fix it. God knows what to do with a name. If the drawer of keys ever empties, start asking for more. People always have a key in a pocket they think is trash. He wrote one more, longer, and sealed it in an envelope marked for the one after me. Inside he didn't put instructions. He put the hinge rules, the brass plate motto, and a hand-drawn pencil hinge. He asked Sister Katerina, a small woman with wire-rim glasses and the stubborn calm of a nurse, to carry the dormition when he could not. She didn't gush. She nodded. I'll keep a drawer, she said. Keep 2, he answered. On the next day of the door, someone asked when they would finally finish the 3rd hinge. Samuel looked at the penciled outline. He shook his head. Not yet, he said. Not by one man. That evening, after the candles burned low, Sister Caterina gathered a tilted crew, 2 teenagers. A widow from Naples, a deacon from Accra, the gardener, and a seminarian who always stood in the back. They set the door on sawhorses and, together, chiseled the 3rd hinge bed. The widow's hand was steady. The teenager's hand slipped and nicked the wood. They left the nick. They set the hinge. It fit. They didn't varnish. They didn't clap. They penciled a faint 4th outline on the opposite side and put the chisels away. In the morning people noticed nothing and everything. That night, alone in his room, Samuel dreamed of Bari. He was 7 again, then 70 again, then neither. He stood at a plain door and reached for the knob and knew, with the kind of certainty stripped clean of drama, that on the other side was the same room he was already in, only lit better. He woke smiling, the kind that doesn't show on the mouth. He went to the cedar box, took out Luca's short letter, and read it again. Time is a field. All right, he said into the quiet. I'll farm a little more. He walked, slow, unashamed, down to the garden before dawn. The door was there, brassed and penciled and true. A woman in a blue coat stood with a stocky man near the fountain. She said something. He nodded. They began to walk. Samuel sat, because sitting was now the wise thing, and watched them go and come back. He did not think about legacy. He thought about hinges. Somewhere, well past the edges of maps and marble, he trusted Luca was still laughing the soft laugh of men who were wrong about time. And if there is a 4th hinge, and there always is, it waits in pencil, asking the same old question with undramatic patience. Will you help cut this one? The second door, part 4. By the 4th summer, the garden belonged to footsteps. People came early, walked through the frame, sat, wrote, stood, returned. No stage, no slogans, just a strip of earth wearing wider each week. Then came something not pretty at all, a closed door. Not the garden door, a flat in Trastevere. Inside, Elena, 36, set 2 letters on a table, one to the father who'd left, one to herself. She had come to the garden, walked the frame, written, I'm sorry, and I forgive. She rang the bell. No answer. Through the peephole, only darkness. She came back to the garden. No crying, no fuss. She handed both letters to Sister Caterina. You did your part, the sister said. Plain. The other side didn't open today, so we keep respectful distance. Hinge rule number 5. You're not retreating, you're just not pushing yourself into the dark. Elena nodded. She slipped the second letter, the one to herself, into the cedar box. Beside hundreds of other never-delivered truths. No applause. Only truth being called by its right name. Messages to the door mission thickened. Forgiveness is fine. But my home isn't safe. My mother borrows mercy to erase abuse. I wrote, he died before it arrived. Sister Caterina pulled the hinge circle leaders into a small room with a window thrown open for wind. On the wall, 5 plastic laminated lines, the hinge rules. She underlined rules 2 and 3, protect first. Ask, never force. One more thing, she said, no weaponizing mercy. If someone uses the word forgive to pressure you, show them these 5. If they keep pushing, give them a short sentence. No. No frills. No lace. In Bari, the hinge school was so successful it ran short of timber. Saturdays, kids cut hinge mortises and wrote honest paragraphs. The rule stayed strict. 1 hinge equals 1 truth. Mail it or don't, your call. A teen named Davide scowled over his page. What if she rips it up? Then you still wrote it. The old carpenter said, eyes never leaving his chisel. You're not a bin. Each month, the school sent an unfinished door up to the garden. People touched them not like relics, but like their own unfinished work. The key drawer stopped being empty. One day an old man arrived holding a photo of a tiny brass key. I think mine is here. They let him try. Not the holy door. Not the donation box. A music box someone had left months ago under a bench, a ballerina stuck mid-turn. The key fit. He wound gently. The dancer spun once, twice. The old man closed his eyes and cried without sound. Her box, he said. I've been carrying the song in my pocket. From that day, Sister Caterina quietly added a 6th line to her own list. Keep a drawer for small hopes. Not everyone played fair. A churchman across the ocean wrapped himself in the language of mercy to polish his image, no accountability attached. Evidence came. Adrian, Samuel ordered a process. Face to face. He said it clean. Mercy is not a blindfold. Justice is the frame of the door. He removed him. He put it in writing. Some sniped. There goes your nice story. A good story doesn't fear the whole plot. He told Cardinal Mendes. It only fears lies. Marco wrote again. I read my sentence to the sea at Livorno. I slept. My aunt called. My father left a small box for me. Inside was a photo of my mother laughing. I had forgotten that face. Thank you for the sentence. Samuel underlined. I slept. He kept that note in his pocket for a week, proof you could touch. Father Francesco, the hospital chaplain, fell ill in Spain. Samuel visited. This time the penitent was an old man in a black suit. No white cap. Afterward they sat inside a silence that didn't need repair. Do you ever wish the door hadn't broken? Francesco asked, nodding toward the two bright brass plates. No, Samuel said. Breaks teach better than pamphlets. And brass is good. Francesco smiled. Brass is good, he murmured, and closed his eyes to rest. Refugee families began to come. A boy in a blue cap circled the frame 3 times a day. On the 4th, he shoved a folded paper into the brass plate and bolted. The gardener brought it up unopened. What does he want? He asked. Samuel unfolded it. Block letters. Crooked. Stubborn. Baba, if Baba come back I will not sleep and stare. I will stay at table. I do not shout. Baba can shout 1 time. Then stop. Samuel folded it. Started for the cedar box. Then changed his mind. Hang it in the hinge school. He said, let the boys learn from a boy. 2 weeks later the same child walked straight through the frame. Then back. He didn't look to see if anyone saw. He didn't need to. A donor arrived with money and a speech. We'll scale the door mission. Dashboards. Metrics. Success. At last. Samuel shook his head. We don't count like that. We measure 3 things. Sentences spoken without shaking. Chairs kept empty long enough for real safety. Boxes of letters kept in quiet places. If those go up, we're fine. That's not data. It is, Samuel said. You're just not used to it. Mendes chuckled in the corridor. You're very good at losing friends. I prefer keeping the work. Samuel said. They added 1 practice. Blunt as a brick. Walk and return. On the day of the door each year. No speeches until everyone had walked through once and back. Then you chose one of 3 stations, a confessional, a table with paper, or a bench with a mediator. Only then could anyone take a mic. You're making people earn it. Someone grumbled. No, Samuel said. I'm making them do it. It worked. Microphones got dull. Benches filled. The path of bare earth grew 2 handspans wider. Age pressed in. Knees first. Then sleep. Samuel asked to shorten the Wednesday route by 20 steps and to stop hiding chairs behind pillars. At night he wrote on index cards and slid them into the cedar box. If you can't walk, bring the door into your mind. It counts the same. Don't know what to pray? Say the name of the one you haven't forgiven. Sit with it. Don't fix it. God knows what to do with a name. If the key drawer empties, ask for more. Everyone has a key in a pocket they think is trash. He wrote a longer note and sealed it. For the one after me. No long instructions. He slipped in the hinge rules. The brass plate line, it fell. We stood it, and a pencil-drawn hinge. He called Sister Katerina. You carry this when I can't. She didn't mist up. She nodded. I'll keep 1 drawer. Keep 2, he said. At the next day of the door. Someone asked when they'd finally finish the 3rd hinge. Samuel looked at the pencil line. He shook his head. Not yet. Not by 1 person. That night. After the candles guttered, Sister Katerina gathered a motley crew, 2 teenagers, a widow from Naples, a deacon from Accra, the gardener, and a back-row seminarian, set the frame on sawhorses. And they cut it together. The widow's hand was steady. The teen's hand slipped and scarred the wood. They left the nick, the hinge seated true. No varnish, no clapping. They penciled a faint 4th outline on the opposite style and put the chisels away. In the morning, people noticed nothing and everything. That night a very simple dream. Samuel stood before a plain door. Reached for the knob. On the other side was the same room. Only brighter. He woke with a smile that didn't need to reach his mouth. He opened the cedar box. Reread Luca's scrap. Time is a field. All right, he said into a quiet that wasn't empty. I'll plow a little more. Before dawn he went down to the garden. The door was there, brass bright. Pencil lines. True. By the fountain. A woman in a blue coat said something to a stocky man with his hands in his pockets. He nodded. They started to walk. Samuel sat, because sitting was wisdom now, and watched them go and come back. He didn't think about legacy. He thought about hinges, somewhere beyond stone and statute. He trusted Luca was still laughing the small laugh of men who were wrong about time. And if there is a fourth hinge, and there always is, it remains in pencil. Asking with patient plainness, "Will you help cut this one?"